comb!
As we discussed in my last video, I've been getting more into comic books lately, and while there's loads out there, the ones that quickly got my attention were the ones that either adapted or take inspiration from one of my favorite mediums out there, being Tokusatsu. If you're new to the channel or just don't know what the heck Tokusatsu is, I've made plenty of videos for it in the past, links down below. As a big fan of Toku, it's been great over the years to see it get more recognition and love. And to my surprise, more so recently, there have been a good amount of Tokusatsu-styled comic books being released. As in this video, we're going to be taking a look at multiple Tokusatsu comic series. I'll go through the Toku adaptation comics first before getting into the Toku-inspired ones. Which brings us to the Marvel Ultraman series, which was a surprise when it was first announced. Then again, Marvel has its connections with Tokusatsu. In the 70s, they teamed up with Toei to make the Spider-Man Toku, as well as a few Super Sentai series. And in the 90s, while not a direct adaptation of Kamen Rider, they did make a comic for Masked Rider, the infamous short-lived American adaptation of Kamen Rider. And with this Ultraman comic, they've been entwined with all of the big three of Tokusatsu, which is pretty neat to think about. The Marvel Ultraman series is written by Kyle Higgins, who's worked on a lot of comics over the years, but more notably for this video, the successful Power Ranger comics, and another series we'll be talking about later on in this video. Marvel's Ultraman is like a reimagining of the original 1966 Ultraman show. The United Science Patrol, or USP, is an organization defending the world from kaiju in secret. Our main character, Shin Hayata, has been fascinated with them since a kaiju encounter he had in his childhood. But despite being good at tracking down kaiju, he failed the entrance exam to become part of the USP. However, one day he comes across a giant alien, which under circumstances he winds up fusing with. The giant is named Ultraman, a being from the Ultra race from the Land of Light, who are known throughout the galaxy for defending helpless planets from kaiju threats. It turns out the USP don't have it all under control when it comes to kaiju, as bigger threats are coming to rise. Ultraman came to Earth to stop it, but is a bit hesitant with the people of Earth, as not only was he shot on sight when he revealed himself, but his brother, Ultra 7, may have possibly been murdered by humans when he came down to Earth years ago. However, Shin and Ultraman, now sharing a body together, must come into terms with each other in order to protect the Earth. So far for the story, we have two miniseries, the first being Rise of Ultraman, which acts more as an origin story focusing on the world and characters, and the second being the Trials of Ultraman, which is more action-packed and features a lot of tension as many people start to become suspicious of their new giant hero, which will soon be followed up with the third miniseries coming up later this year, being the Mysteries of Ultra 7. The Marvel Ultra series has been pretty interesting so far. It clearly respects and loves the Ultra series with some callbacks and utilization of Ultra lore, while also putting a fun twist on it all, like the reimagined USP being something a lot more serious and secretive, as well as Shin having a bit more character and backstory than his original counterpart. I'm definitely looking forward to what mysteries will be uncovered with the upcoming Ultra 7 miniseries, and just how much more of the Ultra universe we'll be seeing in this comic. Since even if you know just a bit about the Ultra series, then you know that there's a lot that can be pulled from for this new take. I also really like that Shin and Ultraman are still two separate beings sharing the same body, rather than Ultraman fully taking over Shin or Shin just being granted all of Ultraman abilities like most Ultra leads. As I'm a fan of the shared body dynamic, and shows like Ultraman Z, which you should totally watch if you haven't, make me wish that the Ultra franchise utilized this dynamic a lot more. Overall, the Marvel series is a surprise, as it's one that I would never expect to even happen in the first place, along with it being so passionately made. Though the next comic we'll be talking about is an even bigger surprise than the Marvel Ultra series, as we also have a comic book adaptation of Redman, the Kaiju Hunter. For those that don't know, Redman is a lesser known Toku miniseries done by Tsuburaya Productions, the studio behind Ultraman, that pretty much follows the titular hero hunting down kaiju for like 138 episodes, It's become a bit infamous over the years, as it seems that Redman will violently beat up and kill any kaiju he comes across, even if they weren't causing any harm to begin with, often making Redman seem more malicious than heroic, which has earned him the nickname Red Killer. Now, for this portion of the video, the actual footage I can show for the comic is quite limited, as Redman was not published by a bigger comic book publisher, being Night Shining, and the only way to legitimately read this series as of now is to buy it physically. Still, if you have the means of getting it, I highly recommend this comic, as it recontextualizes the original show, as the series starts off stating that the broadcast of the Redman TV show from the 70s wasn't meant for human eyes, but rather for something much more sinister. Like the TV show, the comic follows Redman hunting down any kaiju he comes across, though now in comic form, these fights are a lot more tense and brutal than what the original TV show would allow, making Redman feel like a kaiju slasher villain, in that he seems practically invincible, savage in his kills, and seems to be lurking around every corner for an unsuspecting kaiju. Due to the nature of the whole thing, there isn't much dialogue throughout, making it a pretty fun and breezy read. Though don't let that fool you into thinking this comic is nothing but mindless kaiju fights, as throughout the comic, Redman starts to feel like something's wrong, questioning why he's even doing all this in the first place, even allowing for a few kaiju to be spared. As it turns out, behind the scenes of all the kaiju hunting seems to be a group of aliens using Redman for their own entertainment. Will Redman ever make it out of the scheme, or will he be stuck in this endless red fight? It's amazing how this comic both stays true and reinvents Redman both as a series and character. A lot of love was put into this one, which is really apparent as soon as you open up the comic with an excerpt from Shinichi Oka, a former president of Tsuburaya Productions and advisor, who was actually part of the original camera crew for the Redman TV show, saying that he looks forward to this new comic and what it will bring for the character. The comic also features a brief history of Redman at the end, which is also really neat. Though I guess it isn't a total surprise that a lot of love was put into this comic for an obscure tokusatsu hero, as it was both written and drawn by Matt Frank, a massive kaiju enthusiast who's worked on a lot of great comics over the years, as well as various illustrations for kaiju movies and the like. He's probably most recognized for the Godzilla Rulers of Earth comics, which are amazing, and now thinking about it, probably should have been a part of this video. Maybe next time. Matt's artwork here, simply put, is spectacular, showing that his nickname as the Kaiju King isn't just for show. All the kaiju here stay true to their original designs, but are given a whole lot more life and energy to them that makes all these kaiju hunts all the more thrilling. Definitely give this one a read if you can. Our next two comics actually take a lot of inspiration from the likes of Tsuburaya's Giant Heroes and Kaiju, the first of which being Jenny Zero, which follows the titular character, who at first glance may just seem like your typical foul-mouthed party girl, but it turns out she was once a member of the series Science Patrol, the ASP, and daughter to one of Japan's top heroes, the very Ultraman-like Mega Commander Zero, who died fighting a powerful kaiju. Jenny had a complicated relationship with her dad that eventually led her to move in with her rich best friend in America to forget about him after he passed away. With her dad gone and kaiju still a threat, Jenny is eventually sort of forced to step up and become a kaiju slaying hero like her dad, though that is a tall order considering her lack of recent training, alcoholism, and the fact that some of the members of the ASP don't approve of her at all. Now this comic is pretty early into its release, with only 4 issues making up for its first volume, that even then feel like a kind of setup in establishing Jenny for what's to come up in the series. But with that being said, I think there is a lot of promise here, in learning more about this comic's world, Jenny's origins and potential abilities, seeing her grow into possibly a better superhero if she can stay sober long enough, and of course see her kick more kaiju ass. I definitely had a good time with this one and looking forward to more. And as I mentioned earlier, there is another heavily Ultraman inspired comic we're going to be taking a look at, being UltraMega. I was pretty hyped for this comic when it was first announced, and now that I've read it for myself, I have to say, this one could wind up becoming something special. In the world of UltraMega, kaiju are almost like a plague that infect people and turn them into rampaging monsters, and the only ones capable of stopping them are the UltraMega. People who fused with cosmic beings to gain their power and take on a familiar giant form. While the UltraMega protecting the Earth have done a good job in fighting off kaiju, they eventually meet their match one day and are all savagely killed, causing worldwide panic as with thousands dead, unemployed, and most importantly, defenseless against the next kaiju attack, they quickly focus their efforts into building the next line of defense, being giant robots. But even with that line of security, humanity is still deeply fractured from the loss of the UltraMega. Meanwhile, the kaiju have created a cult for themselves in order to cultivate even more powerful kaiju, eventually leading us to Noah, the son of one of the deceased UltraMegas, who has an understandable grudge against the kaiju cult and dresses up like an UltraMega to retaliate against them. This obviously gets him into some pretty extreme trouble one day, though it's around that time he winds up becoming an UltraMega himself, now being able to get back at the kaiju after many years of torment. However, is one UltraMega even enough to fend off the ever-growing amount of kaiju? Now, like Jenny Zero, this comic only has a volume containing 4 issues out at this moment. However, thanks to the issues having more pages for this series, there's a lot more to bite into with UltraMega. The world building is fantastic here, with humanity still feeling the effects of the previous UltraMega battles in a now kaiju-dominated world. Then you have the lore of the UltraMegas themselves, as well as the kaijus, and their even more monstrous kaiju queen. And then of course you have all of the brutal action, with heavy impact and destruction in every blow here, followed by immense bloodshed, with this comic really showing the harsh consequences that come with these giant battles. The world in this series is heavily scarred with every fight. Casualties happen no matter what, and even things like bleeding can turn into disasters for those watching these fights from down below, as seen quite a few times throughout the series, where blood from the UltraMegas and kaiju can turn into massive tidal waves that flood entire cities, drowning many. And just the thought of drowning in massive waves of blood is super nasty and terrifying to me. Though even without that, this series is plenty terrifying and nasty on its own, with all the crazy kaijus the series features. Honestly, this comic can be pretty bleak, though luckily it does have a sense of humor about it, with how wild things can be, to keep it from getting too dark, even if some of the humor here is still dark humor. While there is a lot to love about the comic, my favorite aspect of it has to be the art, as it is just badass, and those colors. Despite how dark this series can be, there is still a load of color here, making all of its various kaijus and robots, heavily damaged environments, and cosmic landscapes just pop. Simply put, UltraMega rocks, and you should read it. And now we're done with kaiju and Ultraman inspired comics, with our next comic series having a much more Super Sentai influence, being Radiant Black, another series written by Kyle Higgins, which also seems to be the start for a shared universe consisting of Toku-like characters, but more on that later. Radiant Black starts off as the story of Nathan Burnett, a 30-year-old whose life, well, could be better, with a big credit card debt, working many crummy jobs, and not getting any closer to his dreams of becoming a successful writer, eventually leading him to move back in with his parents. While reconnecting with his old hometown and friend Marshall, he comes across a strange black orb, which winds up giving him superpowers in being able to manipulate gravity. And with these abilities, he decides to dabble a bit into superheroics, going under the name Radiant Black, and maybe use this new change in his life to better himself and getting back on his feet. However, sadly as it is for most superheroes, things are never that simple. The Radiant Orb, which gave Nathan his powers, were not meant for him, but rather for something much more dangerous in space. It also turns out that Nathan wasn't the only one to get a Radiant, as there are 3 more out there, and while some don't make the greatest first impression on Nathan, they have to learn to become a team in order to protect the Earth from the forces after the Radiance. while also fighting off some people who've made themselves into supervillains using fallen alien technology. The story here is really interesting with a lot of plot twists, some of which are pretty big game changers for the series going forward, and a lot of intrigue on what the true nature of the Radiants and those after them are. However, beyond the superheroics and alien tech, the characters here are well done, as each of the Radiants have their troubles in their normal lives, but through becoming Radiants have slowly learned to better themselves, even if they make some big mistakes along the way. I mean, Nathan's whole story of being a 30-year-old who hasn't been able to make a stable life for himself yet, constantly overthinking and wondering what direction his life is taking him, genuinely hits hard. I mean, I got a good few years before I hit 30 myself, but still, overthinking and that aimless feeling is one I, and I'm sure many others, have felt quite a lot. And seeing him, as well as some of the other characters, strive to improve themselves, not just as a hero or team, but as people in general, is pretty inspiring. To match the story and characters here, the action is also really strong, with each Radiant having their own unique abilities and power-up forms, which could make for a lot of interesting combinations later down the line, and are also capable of summoning a giant robot. Then there's the art here, which is good, but whenever things go into some cosmic stuff, it reaches a whole new level. The colors are radiant, to say the least, with the vibrant colors and layouts actually leaving me with my jaw dropping a few times as I was reading this comic. However, like I mentioned earlier, Radiant Black is also the jumpstart for a shared universe consisting of Toku-like superheroes, being the supermassive universe. As while all the characters haven't been fully introduced yet, we did get an issue that gave us just a little taste of it all, introducing characters like Rogue Sun, Inferno Girl Red, and the Dead Lucky, most of which will be coming out later this year. Though Rogue Sun has come out with a few issues already, and it's been pretty sweet so far. And seriously, I'm legitimately hyped for this one, as not only will I be able to witness the start of a shared comic book universe instead of trying to play catch up with it as I would with Marvel and DC, but it's also all Toku themed, with the first issue of the supermassive crossover, of course featuring a good old group henshin. I'm pretty much sold, and I can't wait to see how it all folds out. Definitely making a follow-up video to cover all the other supermassive titles, as well as the other Toku comics out there, as while there's already a good number now, I'm assuming there's going to be even more in the future, as there's also a Kamen Rider 01 comic planned to come out soon, that apparently might even work as a sequel to the show, which is interesting, just as long as it doesn't take any cues from the V-Cinema movies. It should hopefully be alright. Hopefully. But that will wrap up this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and tell me in the comment section down below if you plan on reading any of these series, or if you've already read any of them, tell me your thoughts, as I'd love to know. Next video, I'll be doing a sort of retrospective on the original Yu-Gi-Oh manga. Since it will be a bigger video, it might take a while to come out, so look forward to that. And as always, I'm Mr. FalconPunch, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.